So since it's so quiet, I'm going to start.
Yeah.
So my name's Angela. I'm from Northamptonshire Rights and Equality Council, and I'm just going to say thank you so much to everyone who's given up their time to come along to this event. And I'm in particular really grateful for Tre, one of our directors, who has been involved in curating all the amazing performers for this, but also to Hope for collaborating with us. We're on a theme around talking about poverty, but particularly the issues around racial inequality in poverty in this time, in this COVID time. It's having an incredibly dramatic effect on so many individuals in our communities, and it's just really important that we're speaking out loud about this. And again, thank you very much for coming along, and thank you particularly to people who have given up their time to be here. And so I'm going to kind of hand it over to Robin, if that's okay.
Yep. Yes, hi everybody. Thanks for joining in if you're just an attender, but obviously if you're someone who's going to present this evening, thank you very much for giving your time to doing this. We're really keen to see this happen on behalf of Hope. For those who don't know Hope, we're an anti-poverty charity in Northampton, which works every day to try and feed people and help people, support people who are on the margins of society with food and homelessness support and many other things. But we also campaign, and we also care very much about raising awareness of the scale of poverty. As Angela said, COVID has really highlighted the additional burden of poverty that's falling, particularly on Black and Asian communities. And we're now seeing in huge numbers of people who are literally destitute from these communities, who are really going without support or help. And we're all, Angela and I and the other people who provide services, really trying to do something about that. So whatever we can do to raise awareness is a good thing. And we're really pleased that all of you have joined us in this event tonight. So thank you. I'll hand you back to Tre. Thank you most of all to Tre for putting this all together.
Thank you. So when Robin and Angela asked me to do this event, I wasn't really sure. They sort of threw me in the deep end and said, just essentially, can you do this for us? Because I thought I didn't know enough on this issue to do an event on it. So I've basically done some research into the disproportionate outcomes that come with poverty. Poverty is bad for anyone that happens to get affected by it, but as we've seen through COVID, that it has disproportionate outcomes for Black and ethnic minority communities as well. So this session of Can You Poet is on race and poverty. So ethnic minority households in the UK are more than twice as likely to live in poverty than their white counterparts. So when we think of poverty, I often think many of us think of Charles Dickens novels, for example, stories like Oliver Twist, Dodger and Bill Sikes and Fagin, and we really think of like not run down conditions, things like the Victorian style workhouse. So the definition of poverty as I found it was the state of being poor or the state of being inferior in quality or insufficient in amount. For me, those definitions are quite vague, and the images of poverty have moved on quite a lot from the time of Charles Dickens was writing and many of his contemporaries, like people with Thackeray that wrote Vanity Fair, but also Victor Hugo, who wrote Les Miserables, as was set in France during the 19th century, of which poverty is a central theme in that text and the film as well of the same name. Ethnic minority households in the UK are more than twice as likely to live in poverty than their white colleagues, leaving these groups exposed at a disproportionate rate to unemployment caused by COVID, for example. Modern day depictions of poverty are not simply rough sleepers, but also how nurses working in the NHS can also be going to food banks at the same time. It's also the fact that children's free school meals was essentially scorned at by the government. It's also how so many people on 0-hour contracts and are left exposed by exploitative system we call capitalism at the same time. And images of, more recently, in films by the veteran filmmaker Ken Loach. I'm thinking of Ken Loach films. So more recently, I, Daniel Blake, and Sorry We Missed You. Because the characters in those films are not, they're not rough sleepers. Many of them, they do have a roof over their heads, but they're also on the line, basically on the breadline at the same time. So on that note, I would like to invite Marley Talks to the virtual stage, please. So round of applause for Marley.
Thank you so much, Tre. Really honoured to have been invited to come and share with you tonight. So I've got a few spoken word pieces around race and inequality and poverty. Having grown up in poverty myself, the youngest of 7 kids, to a disabled single mother living in a refuge of victims of abuse and that kind of thing, is something that's really important to me, and something that I devote a lot of time and energy to trying to help fight against. So I've written quite a lot of stuff that's actually based around this theme. So the most difficult part was actually picking the pieces that I thought were most relevant for the evening. So yeah, I'll share a few pieces with you. This first one's called Breadline Lifestyle. It's the first poem I ever wrote, and first poem I ever performed in public as well, a couple of years ago. So here we go. When I was a kid, I used to get up in the night and steal crackers to eat under the stairs behind the bikes all the time, until one night my father caught me snacking, but he didn't take them off me. Sent to bed, I'd tiptoe softly, and the breadline lifestyle's rife, whilst mum's still holding shit together and dad's forever working elsewhere, sneaking round with miss whoever's got the funds to keep the bandits rolling, flashing lights and spinning reels, and it feels like nothing changes. What's imagined and what's real, and now I'm 30 years old, I see things with a different view. I pulled the rose tints off my glasses, now my sight's no longer skewed. My mum did well despite the setbacks, 7 kids and while disabled. Scraping by, she kept it hidden while there's food there on the table. And we didn't even know we're poor before, too sure that she'd provide. And now the government is stripping back what's left, a little pride. The kids all grown without a hope of owning homes, and scraping off bare bones of what's left of our society. And quietly they have another try at me, and all that came before would love the rich and fuck the poor. Austerity. Man, there'll be a Grenfell blaze on every street until they've taken everything and handed it to Jacob Rees-Mogg, foggy-eyed and foxy-tailed and robbing blind and Daily Mails and fixing votes and selling data. Yet another snowflake hater taking food from kids like taking candy from a baby. Meanwhile, Liz from M35 is sucking dick to make the ends meet. Man, that's the real postcode lottery. Because you gotta be from AL3 to see 3 kids who mean the world become what they were meant to be. And maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm trapped inside a bubble. I should have learned to work and pay my tax and stay away from trouble. I should have kept in line and paid my dues and waited to retire when I'm 85 and dying and the wealth divide is higher. Liars, cheats, fires, streets aligned with hired beats and private fleets of high-flying creeps that systematically monetize our daily lives as private entities for exploitative tendencies, because they'll hunt you down with perjuries like it's never-ending hide and seek. And the breadline lifestyle's rife whilst man makes money from every crisis. And it's lifeless. Man, I'm tired of this. Thank you. Yeah, so that's a bit about my own childhood. I wrote this piece more recently as a response to the killing of George Floyd, the murder of George Floyd in America. And I wrote it specifically for the last Can You Poet event, actually, but I thought I'd share it again tonight. It remains as relevant now as it was then. It's only a few months gone by. So it's called Boxes of Chicken, and it's about how the Home Secretary decided that in order to tackle knife crime in the UK, they should advertise anti-knife crime ad inside boxes of chicken in some weird sort of nuanced, obviously clearly racist agenda. So boxes of chicken. We're slaves to ideology and consumption. It's selfish. We're slaves to thinking that we're better than anyone else's. We're slaves from when we wake up to the time that we sleep for being born into a system with no help for the helpless. We suffocate, asphyxiate, heart rate perpetuating hatred. We overwhelm, appropriate, abbreviate for the sake of staying basic. Assimilate at any rate the whitewashed state to maintain power. Degenerate, decelerate, propel the hate, their finest hour. The truth is our prime minister's a real racist. And Dave the rapper said it right when he used his platform to say this. And the problem isn't self-isolated when we're peeling back our history just to see where the hate is. Because it takes 8 minutes, 46 seconds to put a man down. 8 minutes, 46 seconds, his head to the ground. 8 minutes, 46 seconds, spectators surround, and it ain't finished in a split second. So come gather round, because we've got a history as whitewashed as the paper I write on. Colonial, custodial, protecting the white ones. And if only you'll believe it when you're faced with the lives gone, because you'll hashtag Black Lives Matter. But are you ready to fight, son? And I'm talking from a privilege that I don't debate. I hit the jackpot of the century. I'm white, male, and straight. And I know my heart is meant to be my pale skin fate, because I know I couldn't live with being silent on hate. When I grew up, my estate was always teeming with diversity. But I still remember the rejoicing when my first brown friend got into university, and thinking, why is it such a win? It seemed a little bit perverse to me. Absurdity is when the powers want the universe to be you versus me, because that's the way to keep the division. So they can profit from the black lives that they tossed into prison. So they can bomb the Middle East and its imperialism. And we can all sit back and benefit from anti-knife crime missions stamped inside boxes of chicken. Thank you very much. So I do a lot of work with, try and do a lot of work with homeless shelters. I usually volunteer my Christmas, which is a bit more complicated this year for obvious reasons with COVID and everything else. And I wrote a piece last year as part of an open Christmas event that I volunteered at in Coventry. It's called Get a Job. Get a job. That's what they say. To the man who sits there on the corner every day looking for change, a way to pay for the things he needs to make the pain a little less unbearable today than yesterday. Looking for change, looking for anything that helps to pass the time. Sit there, unwind the complex mind to understand and then define the very nature of decline. Each sip of wine, another binding promise, but he sits there, honest. Can't get a job without a home. Can't get a home without a job. Can't get a job without a home. Can't get a home without a job. Can't get a job without a home. Can't go an hour without another vacant glance from those who pass. And as he asks for change, they hear him ask for change. It doesn't resonate, but what he needs is change. It's not political. It's something physical, humanitarian. I'm talking people helping people. Well, ain't that a scary one? Because we're all created equal. And yeah, it's fair enough. You worked hard all your life. Why should you care and love for anyone but yourself, your kids, your wife? You share enough to have your own friends believe that you're a real swell guy with a nice car and a great job and a real swell ride that you use to drive past that shelter every night without a second thought for those inside. You can't get a job without a home. Can't get a home without a job. Can't get a job without a home. Can't get a home without a job. Thank you. So it's really strange performing to not hearing people, but I'm so desperate for us to get back on stage and meeting with each other and enjoying each other's company. But we'll get to it, I'm sure. But it's still brilliant that these kind of events have carried on throughout lockdown and kept us in touch. And You know, we made some brilliant friends from around the world as well, which is awesome. So we're going to have to do a world tour at some point, all of us, I think. This next piece is called If Money Talks. It's a little bit about a generational divide. Yeah, it's called Money Talks. If money talks, he would say, you haven't quite got enough this month. Am I right? You spent too much on drinks last night, or you're a little short for rent. And then I'd go into full meltdown, rash decisions, they don't help now, sweat brow, let down, brimming with regret. How could I be so dumb? To have the audacity to believe that in 2020, I should be free to socialize and mobilize a life that sees me progress beyond living to pay rent. I don't even hate my landlords. They're great. It's the thought of regretting that chai latte that I hate. The idea that £2.25 could jeopardize my fate. Well, why wait for the bailiffs? I'm already fucked. And each month it's the same if I'm cautious or not. Am I just a jumped up millennial, entitled perennial, peripheral vision, not focused, ephemeral, joy-loving socialist? Sit back and just hope for it. Not willing to work, but say it's free and I'll vote for it, say the old boys down at the old Royal Oak. No time to find out why I'm working and broke. Because I'll sit there and listen to your take on life. Each sentence creating a greater divide, because you're right, while you're having your fourth or fifth pint. But if I make a point, cut it off at the root, because there's no chance that wisdom could come from the youth. Gun hating, political engaging, rights craving, work slaving, climate changing, coffee drinking, hard thinking, swimming while this ship's sinking, $9 grand a year to hear your nonsense while that pint sinks in. You understand the world and think that all we do is party, but can't comprehend the difference between a flat white and a latte. And it's not important. I know it isn't. I just need you to know that young people can make a decision without your permission. Our vote's for the one who reflects in our vision. Because we grew up on these diverse streets. Ahmed and Ishmael, DMs on their feet. 90s MCs, all colors and creeds, making tapes in the yard. A familiar beat, and I know I don't look like that's where I belong, but surrounded by them, man, that's where I call home. Cut off from the wealth, well, we're making our future. And I'm sorry if sharing this town doesn't suit you, but if living with us is an order too great, then it's you with the problem. It's you with the hate. If money talks, it'd be saying, keep counting. Each man for himself while division is mounting. But if selling my soul is the goal in the end, well, then I'd rather be broke and surrounded by friends. Thank you very much. I've been Marley Talks. Really looking forward to the other artists and the talks to come ahead. Thanks for inviting me. Lovely to see you all. Check me out on social media.
Oh my God. Every time Marley comes to perform, like, I don't get it. Like how like someone that's that good at poetry, and he only performed for the first time like last year. I think it was January 2019. He had the first Can You Poet event. So yeah, thanks Marley for that. I'm gonna read a poem. I'm gonna read part of a poem, and then read the other half later on, I think. And it's a poem I wrote specifically for tonight. So the big issue, essentially. The big issue is the links between race and poverty need to be talked about more. In the context of race and racism and the work of Kimberly Crenshaw, to an extent, white Britishness is like armour, where nearly 3 in 5 ethnic minority UK households in this country live in poverty. For Black Britain, it didn't start here. In the 17th and 18th century, where Blacks were treated as tourists at Liverpool's piers, dating back to the stories of enslaved Black men and women, the city of Liverpool has always had Black citizens. In addition, on London streets, the Black poor were rounded up in fleets and sent to Sierra Leone by the Committee of Relief, founded in 1786. It was a charitable organisation that overlapped with the abolition of enslavement. And after World War I, there was change, instability, and uncertainty. And in 1919, there were race riots in Liverpool and in Cardiff. No heroes welcome for the survivors of the Somme and Verdun, but job shortages and mass unemployment. Before the war, Britain's Black population was an estimated 10,000 scattered around, focused on places like Liverpool, Cardiff, and port towns, living in what reports called distinct foreign colonies. Blacks and Asians were blamed for slashed wage slips, like today as immigrants were scapegoated for Brexit. Back then, employers fired Black people in a time before employment rights, as white workers would rather just work with whites. As tensions rose about jobs in England and Wales, some didn't like the idea of racial mixing, ours, not yours. And on the 5th of June, 1919, a fight broke out between some white Scandinavians and Black sailors in a Liverpool pub, laying the groundwork for what became the Liverpool race riots, where a Black man, Charles Wotton, was lynched at the docks. When Black and white veterans were on the breadline, a part of recent British past that history forgot. Where race and poverty met in 1919 is not exclusive to now with the COVID-19 see food banks and austerity in the parent colony, as the descendants of enslaved Africans and those that survived the divide of India, creating Pakistan, and those that came from Kenya, Uganda, and Vietnam continue to fight and die in the corona wars. Since this virus hits the Black, brown, and poor worst of all, this is now part of Britain's social history, across the intersectional lines of race, class, and poverty. What legal scholar Kimberly Crenshaw coined in 1989 as aged as well as wine fermenting like leaves in autumn, with critical race theory debated in the House. And despite what those Black Tories spout about the divisiveness of race, law, and power, not every anti-racist is a person of colour. Now we see injustice spreads like springtime seeds as the Squad and AOC inspire worldwide communities. Coronavirus only confirmed what we already know, that poverty and race have histories of woe and a present that keeps on giving, whilst Marcus just wants to feed the children. Food poverty in children is about class as well as race and is indicative of the failures of the welfare state that William Beveridge in part laid foundations to build in the tint of workhouses, sweatshops, and cotton mills. And on that note, I will introduce Sarah Edwards to the stage, who is going to be giving a talk about poverty in the context of the criminal justice system and other bits, I'm sure. So, Sarah, thank you.
Hi Trey, hi everyone. Great poems so far. Really amazed at your poetry, both of you. So yeah, as Trey said, I will be talking today from my experience as a probation officer. So I have been a probation officer for the past 6 years, and I've worked for the Ministry of Justice for the past 10 years. So I have worked with a lot of offenders. And I'm also an author, so I've recently written Success on Probation, a step-by-step system to reform your life and release yourself from the mental jail, which is a book all about everything that I use working with offenders to help reform their life and change their life. And the reason I wrote it is because as a mum myself, I'm a mum to 2 little girls, I felt that all my energy was going into helping other people, and sometimes as mums we kind of get left behind. So all those concepts that I used to help offenders are applicable to every one of us. So that's my book. I'm also the owner of Edwards Tutoring, so it's an online tutoring company where I tutor students in psychology and criminology. So I'm passing that knowledge down that I know. So today's talk, I'm going to talk to you about I'm going to kind of share a talk about one of the offenders that I used to supervise when I worked as a probation officer in London. So his name is Jamal. So Jamal is someone who is 23 and he lived in Peckham, South East London. He's probably quite similar to a lot of the offenders that I met, but his particular story, so he grew up on an estate in Peckham. He was a black man, and he had Jamaican parents, Jamaican grandparents, and his whole life was that Peckham estate. So his mum was a single mum because the dad was in and out of prison. He lived with his 4 other siblings, and his grandma played a big part in his life because as a single mum, you need that help and support. So Jamal is someone who was on probation. It was his 2nd sentence, but really for me, I felt like it was his 3rd sentence, because his 1st sentence is poverty. You know, he lived in a life of poverty. So he was there because of a robbery offence, and he had stolen money from one of those security vans with his friends, and he got a 4-year sentence. Prior to that, he had possession with intent to supply, so drug dealing offence of Class A drugs. So what is it about Jamal? So I was really struck when I met Jamal about his story from when he was 4 years old. So he started primary school. You know, my little girl now is 4 years old. You're full of hope, you're full of dreams, you're full of expectations, you're ready to learn, you're willing to learn, and you're able to just soak up so much knowledge. Fast forward 4 years, and that little boy is 8 years old. He has been expelled from school. He threw his chair at a teacher and got expelled. So 8 years old, an 8-year-old, I don't know. Just let that soak in. 8 years old, and you're being excluded from school. That's your first experience of the system. That is your first experience of authority. That is your first experience of feeling excluded, feeling like an outsider. And that event is not an isolated, one-off, random event. There is lots of stuff that would have led up to that. Lots of deep-rooted things going on that were possibly not addressed by the school. But yet an 8-year-old boy is excluded. Now, I don't know about you, but working as a probation officer, I wasn't that surprised, because before Jamal, there were many other Jamals who'd also been excluded from primary school for similar things. So fast forward 4 or 5 years, and Jamal, that little boy, is now a 13, 14-year-old boy. And he's been excluded again from his secondary school. He's now in a pupil referral unit. So if those of you that don't know what a pupil referral unit is, basically the pipeline from school to prison. If you go there, it's inevitable that you are going to end up in prison. And like Jamal and many other young boys that I met, they ended up in prison after going to a pupil referral unit. So again, it's just adding on to that layer of Jamal feeling like an outsider, feeling excluded, and his issues not really being fully addressed. So there he is, possession with intent to supply offence, and now a robbery offence. So the story with him just gets more interesting. It gets interesting, but then it's sad because his story is not unique to him. I heard so many similar stories like Jamal's. So we're there in the probation office. Now, the probation office that I worked off in Southwark was quite unique. It was a nice building. You can see the Shard, you can see London Bridge. It's a nice tourist hotspot. You've got a tube station across the road. You've got a pret-a-manger, nice coffee shops, nice little parks, and the Thames a stone's throw away. But Jamal, to get to the office, he would take an hour bus ride from Peckham to get there. He wouldn't take the tube. Now, how many of us have been to London and just tapped our Oyster cards, tapped our contactless, and got the tube like nothing? For someone like Jamal, you need to really consider how will I get to the office once a week? Getting the tube is a big decision for people, for everyday people, for the people that are ignored in London. So we're sitting in the probation office, and it was a lovely summer's day. You know, me naively, I said to him, you know, you must love living in London in the summer. You must be, you know, visiting all the parks, going to the museums, visiting all the tourist attractions. And he just looked at me. No. I I said, oh, you know, you must do. And how many of us sitting here today have gone to London, had a nice day out, took the kids out, seen all the sights, spent time in the parks? But for someone like Jamal, there's a thing that struck me with what he said. He said, that's not for people like me. So that is not for people like me. So Jamal is sitting here, a 23-year-old black man living in London, and he feels like London, as many of us know it, is not for him. So already you're seeing this disparity between his life in Peckham and the London that he sees as not for him. The next thing that really touched me about Jamal's story is, I said, okay, well, have you been on holiday then? No, I've never been on holiday. He had one trip to the beach, and that was organised by a community organisation on his estate to help families like him. Now, poverty runs deeper than just money. We know it costs money to travel to the beach, to get food, to get ice creams, to have a nice day out. But it's also exhausting being a mum living in poverty. You're constantly working, long hours, exhausting job, getting little money. It's mentally draining to take 5 kids on your own to the beach. We don't think of poverty as having an impact on the mental health for everyday people, rough sleepers, normal families like Jamal. Taking a trip to the beach is an emotional burden. It's not just a financial burden. Having to take the kids, coming back exhausted, having to take time off work, or even go to work that night for a night shift. It's more than just a day to the beach. And Jamal only had one experience of that. So what I really want you to take away today is that the barriers are so strong. The barriers are there for Jamal. The barriers and the disparity between the have and the have-nots, they've not gone away. I just want to show you today. So obviously, I'm a mum. So this is Jamal. And these are all the barriers that are in front of him. So there he is living in Peckham. He's on his estate. You know, that's all he knows. He only knows those walls of his Peckham estate. And here's all the barriers that Jamal faces. Growing up with a dad in prison. Growing up with a single mum. Being excluded from school at 8 years old. Going to a pupil referral unit. Going to prison for the first time for a drug offence. Going to prison for a second time for a robbery offence. Having a baby of his own to look after. Not being able to get a job because he's a convicted person who's been in prison. The stereotype that he faces being a black man in Peckham in London. Those experiences have shaped Jamal. And soon you see he has nothing, nowhere to go. And he sees London. Posh Victorian houses, somewhere that he does not belong. Thank you. I've been Sarah Edwards. Like I said, I am a probation officer, online tutor, and an author. And thank you so much for having me in the community today. Thanks.
Thank you, Sarah. I think that's left all of us with lots of food for thought there, because I think every one of those things, it's not just a poverty issue, it has impact, it seeps into all corners of society. I think the school to prison area specifically is one that I resonate with in terms of my interest in education. And then you look at awarding gaps, for example, in schools and universities, black students are at the bottom pretty much when it comes to that as well. At university, there's a 25% awarding gap at university nationally. Yet when you look at that data on a course by course basis, the disparity it can go up to at least like 40% in some cases I've seen, awarding gap for Black students at universities. And that's even before they sit an assignment. Statistically, before they even sit an assignment or anything, the barriers are there. And that's at every level of the education system. And that's just one example. So a recent report by the Social Metrics Commission found that nearly half of Black African and Caribbean households are in poverty, compared with just 1 in 5 white families, 20%, while Black, Brown, and ethnic minority families between 2 and 3 times more as likely to be in persistent poverty than white households. This also leads us to look at generational poverty that will be more difficult to escape from in comparison to white families. That is not to say white families do not experience generational poverty. It's simply to say that environmental factors like racism do not play a role in that poverty, essentially. And whiteness also, I think we also need to be careful who we call who is white and who isn't white at the same time, and which white communities benefit from white privilege, because not all white communities benefit from white privilege. So when I say white, I mean English is your first language, predominantly white, and to a certain degree, working middle class, upper class whiteness. When I say white, I do not mean Eastern Europeans, and I do not mean Irish travellers at all, because those communities will experience racism based on their ethnicity, where they come from what country they come from, and culture as well. So a recent article from The Guardian also stated that the Commission said all people in poverty, particularly those classed as in deep poverty, meaning they lived at least 50% below the breadline, had been far more likely to suffer reduced incomes since lockdown, increasing the risk that the pandemic would drive a significant increase in the incidence and severity of poverty. The same article also stated that more than 14 million people in this country were living in poverty in 2018 and 2019, up by 100,000 the previous year, of which 4.5 million were children, meaning 7% of the population were in deep poverty and 7.1 million were in persistent poverty, meaning they had lived below the breadline for at least 2 of the last 3 years. So when we say poverty, it's essentially violence. When we say violence, it goes beyond the physical, and really damaging policies like the hostile environment, for example, have an intersectionality with poverty. So when the Windrush scandal happened, victims of the Windrush scandal were denied pensions. They were denied access to healthcare. They couldn't report really exploitative landlords. Many of them were made homeless as well, on the basis of a technicality in the Immigration Act that basically said that you had to prove that you had been here since the time you were saying you were here. You had to have one document for every year that you'd been in the UK, essentially. And for many of them, that was since the 1950s, the 1960s. For my grandfather specifically, that if he was taken up in that scandal, which he wasn't, thankfully, he would have to prove that for every year he'd been here since 1958. So that's a lot of documents that you probably won't be able to find a document for every year, and they make it difficult on purpose. So that's why you have so many of that generation being deported. I know next week there's a deportation flight set to go out on December the 2nd. And the scandal has gone on through COVID. It didn't just stop because of coronavirus. The Windrush scandal has gone through COVID. The hostile environment has happened and continued through COVID as well. So when we say poverty, there are intersectionalities with race, with immigration, with sexuality as well. LGBT communities as well are also disproportionately impacted from poverty, especially trans communities as well. So when we say poverty, it's not just a single train of thought. It intersectionally impacts communities, and the more boxes you fit into, the more hostile society can be for you as well at the same time. And on that note, I'm going to invite Veronica E to the stage to perform some poetry.
Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm still just reeling from Sarah's talk. I mean, I've worked in safeguarding for many, many years and worked in an alternative provision. And the layering that you mentioned when you talked about Jamal, I mean, it prompted me to write a poem entitled Brace. And I'll do that in a bit. I've just dug it out. I'll do that in a little while. But I just want to kick off with something that I kind of wrote this evening. I haven't even finished it, but I'm going to just give you what I've got, okay? What was kind of downloaded into me. It doesn't even have a title, but I'm just going to go for it, okay? So you're poor, like Oliver, you can't have more. So you're poor, you can't go through that door. So you're poor, a pole with a bag tied, that's folklore. But today, you can't find enough money to be comfortable, while your bodies and labor have made the powerful profitable. When melanin in melanosomes determines freedom or incarceration, liberty or enslavement, in the midst of eugenicists who covered their exterminist agenda, but created laws to sterilize Black children until 1983, made a bill to spread the pill. Only the fit must survive. Tried to RU486 me. Let me share unreservedly. When melanin in melanosomes determine inhuman behavior, really? Planned Parenthood, a savior? Thank you. Okay. Sorry, I've just got tons of papers here. All right, this one is entitled My Truths. It's about truth, because sometimes we try to cover up the truth. We don't really want to face truth. And when it comes to being poor, being, as Tre mentioned, the intersectionality with race, geography too, sometimes the truth can get hidden, yeah, covered up. But this one was inspired by that aspect of truth being let free or being allowed to exist. Excuse me while I reach out and grab my truths, unapologetically and meaningfully. And please, if you are going to mention chip to me now, ensure mine comes with cod and plenty vinegar. As I get bolder with my truths, please, if you are going to mention shoulder to me, then suffix it with bag or prefix it with frozen. Alaska has many frozen roads. Excuse me while I reach out and grab my truths. Geographically, historically, hold on. Don't give me a polarized one facet view. Give me the Polaroid, full color, wet shake, then the truth set for all time. Excuse me. In fact, don't. While I reach out, touch, taste, handle truth. Truth that you have not forgiven me for, because it tastes of nails, fire, and blood. Please don't seethe in anger at truth. Truth is innocent. Please don't bury truth in a box made with lying wood, hammered down with bitterness nails. Please set truth free. I know it is daunting to look, examine, and see the evidence, prismed as in a silverback glass. But in so doing, in all honesty, we will all be made free at last. Thank you. And then I'll finish off with a poem that I think Sarah might have sat in my room while I wrote this and watched over my shoulder. when she referred to Jamal's life story. Brace. 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 He was only 10. He was out late, running with the big boys. Brace. Brace. He was arrested at 14 and locked up for a crime. Insecure estate. Brace. Brace. Sadly, his mind, mental health, wasn't in a good state. Brace. Brace. At 18, he became a man and his thoughts turned to murder. He had a gun. Brace. Brace. At 35, he came out of prison. He had to start a new life and try to assimilate into society. Brace. Brace. At 55, I stood by his graveside. Brace. Brace. His son was only 10. He started staying out late and running away from the children's home. Brace. 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 Thank you. That's my pieces.
Thank you. For the next act, can Rohan, are you ready?
I'm ready.
Yeah, you ready? Okay.
I'm ready.
I don't know Rohan well, but I've watched him perform a couple of times now, so I'll let him speak for himself. So this is Rohan Samuels.
Thank you. So yeah, my name is Rohan Samuel. I'm a spoken word poet. I'm a teacher. I'm a behavior mentor. I grew up in Croydon in South London. And I've been doing spoken word poetry for a year and a couple of weeks. And I just want to get my views across, my points across. I want to inspire people. I want to inspire positive change. I want to provoke thought. And I'm going to do 3 pieces, which I hope do just that. And I hope you can take away the message from these pieces as well. So the first piece is called Black Monopoly. And it's a piece that kind of reflects how I felt growing up in London. And I've related it to a game board we all know very well called Monopoly. So this piece is called Black Monopoly. Being black in Britain is a monopoly, a commodity of monochrome. I'm not spreading this colored man's mind. Display the truth only in black and white because Black Britain is a game board of pieces you can't piece together. I always feel like we had to take a chance. Black culture is being breathed into the community chest, but we pay the reparation toll for their free parking. There are no get out of jail free cards for the black youth and the older minds. Prism systems profiting over my skin color, trading my skin for boxes with bars. The old Kent rode their way to freedom only to be rushed back to reality. Automatically, we look to the heavens. Preachers and pastors praying together in segregation of religion, black churches. As if we were subconsciously told not to enter their white chapel, but made to digest colonial books of white African Israelites. 40 days in the desert and you couldn't even catch a suntan? Evidence shows the angel is licking tongues of devilish disguise. Houston, we have a problem because my skin has always made me feel like I'm living on the outskirts of a borrowed land, a land that is systematically Pentonville-lifying minds against the shades of black. So we develop a chip on our shoulder. Societal minds will tell you to pack it in. So you decide to retreat into your bag as a safe haven of flavor, where you can spill hot chips like cold facts, yet they're quick to change the narrative and tell you to stop crying over spilt milk. Black Britain is a race of mispronounced names. Can't catch the spelling, but will sound it out like Pall Mall in their Whitehall tone without even a tone into your identity. Rubber stamped as gangsters, thieves and job stealers, yet we never stole. Northumberland lands into devastation via xenophobic avenues. Check the design. Britain took a bow when they bow street names together to praise slave masters. branded statues in honor. And even if you don't know, the eyes of history will always stare at you with cold and lifeless looks while the system tries to keep you still. So who's the real statue? You see, being black in Britain isn't so Marlborough light. There is a heaviness to the skin tone, a weight that carries 400 years of pain. We talk about the handcuffs of injustice, yet we have been slowly wrapped and shackled with growing vines in these streets, stranded in your own self-doubt and self-worth because the pipe dream of Britain spills more sewage as the truth becomes present. Not such a fleeting feeling being black in Britain. The negative aroma of your skin tone is set in stone and whitewashed with racial hate that got systematically more structured the higher up the social classes. Even before the days of pigeons in Trafalgar Square, we have always had to fight for our basic rights to live. Let me stop for a second. Let me go back a few paces. Because 2020 has showed us there is a connection. Not only do the international monopolies of countries recognize we are bored of games, but in Britain we have started to see the light from the underground, connecting lines like Leicester Square, Coventry Street and Piccadilly, rejecting these Regent Street hustlers who want to prevail white privilege and austerity doses while the monarchy lay dormant. It's my time to breathe. Because black excellence is making its way to places of white privilege, places like Oxford circus acts to try to counter our resilience, but blacks in Britain have never been more united than now. Bond streets with our blood and uprising mentality. Systematic regimes may try to keep us parked in our lane, never to stray off the path, because once we get in tune with our true identity of culture, we may fare a chance of living under a colored tone of commonwealth that sowed seeds of truth into British soil, having queens and kings cross swords with heritage to find out we have queens and kings in our blood heritage. So people here, does that mean anything to you? Unless Britain can find a way to marrow-bone cookie, mix skin and mind so the atmosphere of prejudice doesn't become a thoroughfare in the city like Fenchurch Street Station. Instead, like the Liverpool, our streets to be detoxified so the blood that we can share isn't the blood red you see stained on the flags of Britain. So never tell me not to pass go. I'm collecting pounds of black wealth like it's the 27th of June, electrifying my electrolytes until I discharge my energy like electric companies. I will never suppress my energy. I am not so toxic. This masculine will develop waterworks to bring monsoon seasons to these concrete jungles. My compliance should never be viewed as alliance. I don't pay income tax on freedom. You see, Black Britain is a monopoly, and I'll always keep moving until my freedom is owned by my own properties. That's me. Thank you so much. Thank you. I appreciate it. The next piece that I'm gonna do, it's a piece that I like. However, I don't expect anyone to like this piece, and I'm not gonna say why I don't want you to like this piece. I just don't want you to like it, and it's gonna become very clear about 3/4 of the way down why you're not supposed to like this piece. So this piece is called Unconscious Bias. What do I look like to you when you see me? When you view the color of my skin, how many colors do you envision is in this colored person? Do you view yourself as humanitarian when humanitarian each other apart with words and phrases that even they didn't know was racially biased? Oh wait, sorry, let me just stop, because I see like there might be kids here. So I just want to give a trigger warning that there are racial slurs in this poem. So if you do have kids, then they might have to just mind their ears. So I apologize. So yeah, I just want to put that out there. So let me start again, sorry. What do I look like to you when you see me? When you view the color of my skin, how many colors do you envision is in this colored person? Do you view yourself as humanitarian when humanitarian each other apart with words and phrases that they didn't even know was racially biased? Am I the same nigga you saw when I went on stage and recited my poem, No More Niggas, Just Brothers and Sisters? Or is it more politically correct to label me as a black man even though my coffee complexion is called Americano? How coon, you not see that racial slurs are tearing apart society? Communication is the fabric of a strong relationship, and it doesn't matter how many sticks and stones my ancestors fought with, words will always hurt me. So don't sit there and claim the just the role all day, because there's nothing funny about racism. I will always stand for unity and equality. And the older generation may look at me as upper T, but if I don't take my people out of the peanut gallery, then how can we be viewed as equal? When those in the higher stands of this theatrical scene of life would throw peanuts at the blacks in the segregated areas of the theatre, our reactions being a prequel to the stage show, we were viewed as animals. Why does the colour of my skin depict the way you look at me? Is my personality not enough for your friendship? Or is there still a debate as to whether I look ape or monkey-like? I mean, surely we all came from Darwin's theory. Or was there a racial evolution of the white genes so the blacks were left to hang in their savagery? Or am I spreading more exotic thinking to the urban thinkers to make their mindset more unique and less minority? Because even I had to look within myself to see if I was naive to carry this British tongue with a native twang and hope that the people would accept me for who I portrayed, instead of being compared to chocolate bars or being personified in racial statements like, Rohan, you're brown. You're not really black. Like, you're not black like the other black people. Which led me to ponder if my blackness was half breed into my melanin like a newborn, I would grow into my color. Seeing that my blackness was perceived as blue gum, that means a slave that's lazy and refuses to work. So I had to up my mentality, knock on the door of my mind and make sure this niglet grew up to be a nigger with a conscious mind. And it's ironic that once you get to a level of understanding, some enslaved man ethnics will view you as a house nigger instead of a field negro, as if I never had to feel negro. I guess that's the new meaning to the teapot calling the kettle black. Well, know that I don't stand for that. You can sanitize your hands with political poison, but we will wash our hands of your ethnic cleansing, because this so-called jungle jigaboo bunny never came down from a tree to lay with porch monkeys and stay thick-lipped. My poetical spotlight doesn't make me a minstrel. You can leave them minuscule minstrel remarks back on home into the bed next to your gollywog. Racism will never die. Or so it seems. Be kind. Know what you mean. Accept others for what they look like. You cannot counter racism with reverse discrimination. That's a media myth inception brought about to make you believe that you should segregate your racism to segregate people even further, whilst the media lay on their perch like a bird but label you as Jim Crow. Born into a society of injustice that you don't see through childish eyes. It's when you grow up you realize you're just in an unjust society that conforms to higher pleasures, leaving someone like me, black, male, lower class in the lower grounds. I guess I'm just a spade with a spade trying to dig my way out of the pit of social depravity. With a swing of my tool, I am drip fed into a system of statistics, racially profiled as a black single father. Yet I'm the one who educates my so-called caramel cookie kids about book smarts, that's school, and street smarts, that's the road. But that doesn't give you the right to call them tar babies. When I look throughout my life, I realized my mammy was educating me the same way. Yet she could not predict the speed of which society evolved. And now it's up to my moss head to think clear and not fuzzy, so unity can unite us into one unit, fighting for the abolishment of racism in the systematic and social classes. What's your stand on racism? Would you pick a side or pick a ninny? Would you ride the bus on the same seat as Rosa Parks sat and make Martin's dream come true before they X all Malcolm's and delete the colours of Mandela's Rainbow Nation? You see, if you're comfortable with my wordplay in this poem, then you're part of the problem. I've highlighted and underlined many racial phrases so we can draw a line under the use of these racial phrases, communicating in a way where we offer no offense and not sit on the fence when we need to stand. You see, I still have faith in a humanitarian world where humans don't tear but repair and repair the past burnt bridges with foundations strong enough to topple racial fortresses. Roll between Martin and Malcolm, passive-aggressive action, not to hurt, but to make it clear that we have evolved from our ancestral homes of sticks and mud. We are now bricks and mortar, and society will not be blown away by the big bad wolf. We hold our heads up high. So take a little look at my chinny chin chin. We stand united in a daisy chain of colors and races, shades and faces to tell you that we will pull your conscience from your bias and tear apart racism until there's nothing left. Thank you very much. I apologize for not putting the trigger warning on earlier, so that's my fault. I apologize. And then the last piece I want to do, it's called Kneel, and originally it was a tribute to George Floyd, and then I had to sit with the poem for a while and think about it. And I realized that the more I sat with it, the more I realized it wasn't a tribute to George Floyd. It was a tribute to everyone. It was a tribute to anyone that's lost their life under police brutality or lost their life under means of oppression. I don't just mean death. I mean windrush. That is a loss of life. You built a home within a grounds, within a stable country, and you were rushed back to another country. That is a loss of life. I mean loss of life in terms of you understood the world as something fun within childish eyes, and you were systematically pushed down because your life was not seemed as relevant to a system. For me, that is also a loss of life. So this poem is called Kneel, and I want to say rest in peace, George Floyd, and I want to say rest in peace to any of the fallen soldiers, and I want to say rest in peace to anybody that is striving to become better or striving to get out of the situation that they didn't put themselves in. You have the right to remain silent because your words are powerful and can be used as more than a means of expression. You have the right to remain silent because your words, if used correctly, can spin evil from those in power. They will strip your rights from you during arrest. Even arresting duress is not applicable if you have too much sun in your system, as you have burnt your rights when you acquired melanin. So never mind your business. Their business is to enact what your mother told you in times of play. I brought you into this world so I can take you out of this world. And the law does not want to uphold you anymore. Boys in blue showing they are colorless. Every black man's height is 6 feet. A subtle skin tone that's not good enough to walk these streets, but good enough to be dormant under someone's knee. Good enough for the chokehold, grappled, get down to the ground. Because that wallet is a weapon. And the baritones in your voice under the pressure of white privilege is making the police feel nervous. Different circumstances breed different intentions, and their 21-gun salute. Every shot that rings makes us a memory or a meme, and I wonder what you'll view first. Everybody wants to speak after the matter, quick to hop kins like Katie and cause a social storm. But during the matter, you only see brutality on camera. At the bottom, they're screaming, stop the violence, but at the top, are they willing to stop the violence? History has shown that black people have made examples of technological breakthrough in each era, yet we're being made examples of. Why does another soul have to be lifted through the bondage of their body? Allow black to be viewed with extreme caution, that our rights to be human is being taken away. Human rights is not a choice, no matter what Kanye says. You persecuted the knee that Kaepernick kneeled with, yet this white man was really causing the hurt. So the pressure that was exalted onto George had him needing support from those around. Camera footage showed the accounts held when it's humans that have the right to make sure that their actions are right. So I don't care what camera held these accounts. It's the officer that has to be held accountable. Play role reversal and see the media stream to red with hatred if a black man kills a white person out of racial hatred. Oh wait, that did happen. Mohammed Noor was given 12.5 years for accidentally shooting a white woman. His Minnesota Police Department said he should not have acted on fear. He should have better assessed the situation. What would it take for the ears above to listen? Another million man march for the millions dead. Do we have to walk a road like Forrest Gump before you see the wrongdoings being set? How many more of us are going to be put in the dirt and displayed on t-shirts? How many more of us are going to have songs portrayed about us that we cannot join in singing? How many more of us will become martyrs for a subconscious cause called black? How many more of us will be buried too early because our life is nothing but a pawn as life is released from our chests? But then they want to talk about looting to take the focus away from the main crime. It's another protest to my protest because Black Lives Matter only seems to matter after the black man dies. Togetherness does not come in posts or memes. It comes in action. Movement within the times means move within your means. Hopefully solidarity will come when both ethnicities start to see that melanin should not equal the rights to live. We should equal rights where we live. Stolen civilizations brought for labor. So whether it's Democrats or Republicans, conservatives or labor, we should not be labeled as mathematical terms. Statistical pleasures in a numbers game, meaning less than. Well, my views are more than, and I don't need cryptic clues for my brothers and sisters. I am not Malcolm X over Y. Someone gets to the ground, we decide to stand up. Someone gets knocked down, we decide to stand up. Someone gets gunned down, we decide to stand up. Instead of flipping to hashtags, flip your mindset to whenever we stand up with us. Whenever we rise up with us. Whenever we band together with us and show the racial hatred and systematic fortitude that we will fight your attitude no matter how many angels are being called back. The time for peaceful protest has been dispatched. and there's no one on the other end of the radio. So instead of over and out, it's just over and out, and that comes a modern day version of pitchforks and fires, because back in the days that was also a legal form of protest. So the statement, I can't breathe, I can't breathe, I can't breathe, will never be held amongst one's breath. I will let every inch of my lungs expand past its limits and breathe out every cry that was snatched from every life that was captured for every moment, that was suppressed by every contract that was signed in society's blood over the backs of the ethnics who stayed silent. Don't think that the time that passed between deaths means it's a time of peace and silence. Oh, you thought it was done. Can Ferguson tell you the same thing? No matter how much passive I emit till I become aggressive, no matter what I'ma do, Diallo will always be seen to them as Diablo. Send 2 roses for Antoine Rose II. You're not forgotten. And neither are you, Tamir Rice. Because it seems Mike Brown complexion complicates society, simplicity cocooned in white supremacy. And whether it's TV screens or newspaper print, we like Sarah read and absorb information with free will, displace our distaste at the fact that we've lost a part of our smiley culture. Let me breathe. That's what should have happened to Eric Garner. And again, life was not supported when they failed to give Eric reason. So when we turned up for Pamela Turner, it turned out that apparently our rights is something we have to prove. Fight for black, no matter your position. Spine. Blacks have been holding the L between our backs, and it took darkness to descend to the ground for the world to believe in Mrs. Floyd's son, Raz. So the life of the black man only seems to be relevant through the line of a hashtag, which means my life doesn't matter to you unless it's being hashtagged. And then you perpetrate all lives matter, except for the black colored man, yet the color black is made through all colors. Black lives matter. Move forward this movement. It's meant to move people forward in unison until the Black Lives Matter becomes less of a slave cuff fact and becomes everyone's way of life. Don't be mad that you don't have a movement. Just be happy you don't need one. That's me, bro. Oh, I love it. Oh, that one gets me every time, man. Oh, oh, that one gets me
Oh
every
my God.
time. Oh.
Marley, Bohan will drop you. Yes.
I don't want to talk about it, Trey. I don't want to talk about it.
You've got competition.
Oh, man. Sorry, bro. That one. Oh, I was
my
choking
God.
up at the end, you know. I can't even lie.
That was so good.
Do I have time for one more, or shall we move on?
I'm gonna move on, but I think
Okay,
we've
cool.
moved so quickly with this. There'll be time at the end for anyone that wants to read again. Anyway, so I'm gonna finish the poem I started at the beginning of the session. So I'll read the last stanza I read, and then I'll continue to the second half. So, coronavirus only confirmed what we already know, that poverty and race have histories of woe and a present that keeps on giving, whilst Marcus just wants to feed the children. Food, poverty, and children is about class as well as race, and is indicative of the failures of the welfare state that William Beveridge, in part, laid the foundations to build in the tint of workhouses, sweatshops, and cotton mills. Now there is a debate about vaccines being thrust onto Black and brown communities in response to the pandemic of COVID-19, but it's not genetics that's killing ethnic minorities. It is systemic racism and inequality. So when we read the literature in conjunction to science's relationship with those who are visibly not white, the blood and toil is in sight, recalling how early on in the corona wars, French doctors wanted to test in Africa, where more than 2 in 5 countries remember the colonial ambition of the French, where they tested nuclear munitions 3 times the power of Nagasaki. As colonial history will show how Europeans enslaved Africans in mass, how the French used them in experiments, but today, in the 21st century, Western corporations test in Africa because of low medical literacy and weak regulations. People have every right to be angry at testing on Africans and African states, as colonialism wreaks havoc, sending children to wait at the pearly gates, denied the health checks of France. As coronavirus spreads across Europe, colonizers dance to history, moving time in analog. Racial capitalism in vaccines see the blood of Ebola and HIV across the African plains. I remember seeing articles online how coronavirus was supposed to beat Africa into silence, but it didn't. Not that we are seeing that in the newsprint. Though many white people disagree that geography is also part of inequality. To grow up poor in Nigeria, Congo, or Zimbabwe is not the same as being poor in Britain or the USA. To choke on roads, rabies, and hepatitis C is to eat in the vice of colonial history. For the UK to thrust this vaccine onto Black and Brown Britain is colonial violence in act and name, history repeating itself again and again, red, white, and blue, stitched in guilt, the Britain that the colonies died to build, at the end of a needle, doomed to cry, as Parliament sings a lullaby. Marcus arrives each night for them to save children's rights. He is lauded as a saviour by parents and families sitting in the footnotes of Victorian charity. Adulthood like a rumble in the gut on the superhighways of austerity Britain. Between the intersections of race and class, what Tory MPs imply is a jolly old farce. Hunger that burns children of 10, bellies chiming like the gongs of Big Ben, cutting the stomach a howling gale. As the working class, the government fails. Many in poverty still work, like nurses full-time on wages that don't make ends meet. Having to decide between food and rent. Yes, we also see street sleepers on the streets, and there's more and more living in tents. Poverty also looks like sofa hopping, and also looks like victims of sex trafficking. In the fog of war and nighttime shrills, will we see a return of bank runs and Hoovervilles, as well as immigrant victims of the hostile environment made to use exploitative landlords and tyrants. Poverty is a many-headed monster. It can happen to anyone, from the builder to the doctor. We teach children that poverty is about class, that it is, but it also has intersections with race, LGBT, sex and gender, disability, eligibility, with multiple overlapping inequalities. Why is none of this taught as part of our history? Is it that we're scared to tell that poverty features in tragedies like Windrush and Grenfell? We teach children about violence and war and build statues to empire and armistice, but don't talk of the spectral swords or the bullets that permeate the job centre and the schoolhouse, and the stories of Black soldiers in the land of Scousers that underpinned the lives of those that fought in French, African, and Belgian theatres of war. And our poverty story in Britain is a photograph, a bus stop tour of cenotaphs, watching street sleepers asking for more. Does this country realise it's not Little England anymore? The relationship of race and poverty are simply two of our worries, as many wait out multiple lockdowns alone. I look outside to hear the shoe town moan to the sound of state violence, but inequality is not new to this small island. From austerity and mental health to stop and search and the unequal distribution of wealth, COVID simply ripped off the plaster. It's time to write Britain off, say a tabula rasa. The big issue is race and class left out in the cold, where nearly 3 in 5 ethnic minority households in this country, Britain, live in poverty. Perhaps we should work on putting that on our national curriculum. And that's that poem. And I won't read anything else tonight, but yeah. That's a first draft, so I've not edited it or anything. And I just did it, and I hope it was good. So thanks for that. So did anyone watch the documentary on Channel 4 called Is COVID Racist? It was on, I think, a few nights ago. And essentially, it basically, it's not what it says in the title. We know it's racist. They basically explore disproportionality in the coronavirus cases. And in this documentary, we are shown that the virus as a singular entity does not discriminate, but environmental factors do. Factors like racism and poverty, because 2/3 of NHS staff have died from the disease, have come from a Black, Asian, or ethnic minority background, irrespective of their social class. At one point, 20% of the NHS staff that died were from the Philippines. Ethnic minority staff felt compelled by their white co-workers and managers to work on COVID wards, pressured. in its infancy, the first 10 frontline staff to die from COVID were black or brown. A 100% death rate at the very beginning of coronavirus pandemic. A death rate of 100% is unheard of, really. We know COVID does not discriminate, but racism clearly does. And when racism exists in our institutions, as well as poverty, having disproportionate outcomes against black and brown people, we begin to paint a picture of why these communities are at greater risk. It's not the disease that's the killer here in this matter of sense. It's everything that happens before they get hit, before they get infected with the disease, essentially. So environmental factors, discrimination, racism, institutional racism, going back off what Sarah said earlier about Jamal, and all the barriers that that happened to him. So before they even get to work into the NHS, what are they having to deal with at home, on the road? Are they being on going to work? Are they being stopped and searched by police driving to work and stuff like that? It's the biological weathering that degrades your immune system, essentially, and that's when we see disproportionate outcomes amongst black and brown people, but people who are black, brown, and poor as well at the same time. And when we realise that they are disproportionately impacted by poverty, we then see that Marcus Rashford's school meals campaign could be considered to be addressing the intersections of race and of poverty and class too. You could say that that campaign is an anti-racist act in itself. And when we see there is an ethnicity pay gap in Britain as well, it does not take too long to realise how economic poverty can impact people's access to quality food and accommodation if you're eating low quality food and living in lower quality housing and accommodation. It's all linked up with all these things. Both of these things can impact the immune system and then leave you more exposed to disease, i.e. coronavirus. The ethnicity wage gap is historic. Studies have shown from ethnic minorities, people from ethnic minorities tend to earn less than white people, often linked to socioeconomic deprivation and disadvantage and racism. Additionally, some immigrants, for example, may not have a good command of the English language and are then perceived as unable. But in their own language, they are able. And many immigrants come to this country with qualifications that aren't accepted in this country as well. I know when my grandparents came here as part of the Windrush, many of their generation came here with teaching qualifications that weren't accepted by a British education system. At the same time, today and in 2020, I've met taxi drivers with PhDs and that sort of stuff. So the qualifications that they get in their own countries often aren't accepted here, when they should be. Really, but that's the valuable skills and assets that are being wasted. So immigrants to Britain often work in low-paid occupations and are often overqualified for the jobs they do, i.e. quite a lot of taxi drivers I've met in Northampton are overqualified for the jobs they do. Many of them should be lecturers at universities, to be honest, PhDs. There should be professors at universities, many of them, as many of them were from the countries that they came from. It's also important to look at employment rates and the percentage of groups with a percentage of said groups with a paid job. That is excluding freelancers and the self-employed too. So this can vary between ethnic groups and by gender, with men and women. White British people have tended to have the highest rates of employment, which I found between 2002 and 2014 at around 70%. The EHRC, so the Equality Human Rights Commission, take that from what you will. I know some people in this chat are very skeptical around the EHRC. They tell us that Indians also have high rates of employment. However, rates for Pakistani and Bangladeshi women, for example, have consistently been low, dipping below 30%. So poverty, to to people in general who are looking in and don't know a lot about this subject, I find in my experience, poverty and homelessness have been used interchangeably, when that is not the case. Poverty looks different today than it did a decade ago, even a century ago, and it has many different images of what it can present itself as. So that's the statistics. Statistics don't tell you the story; they give you an overview of a society. And I think the most heartbreaking things that you will ever see with poverty is when you talk to people about it, who've lived it, and the things that they tell you about it. So like what Marley was talking about in his poetry, you can't tell that story in statistics. Statistics don't tell you anything. They give you an overview of a situation. So yeah. And on that note, I would like to invite Esther to perform some poetry, or Yester.
Thank you very much. Yeah, thanks Marley for my new name. I'm going to use that all the time. Just to give you a little bit of background about me. I grew up in South London, in Thornheath. My sister's on this call as well, and she just WhatsApped me and was like, "Rowan's representing." So I was born in Sussex, moved to South London, and as a teenager moved to Northamptonshire. My mum, single parent, I'm half African American. I've now got 4 girls of my own. All this will be relevant when you hear my poetry, by the way. And I've volunteered at the Hope Centre for about 2 years now, I think, although sparsely through COVID because of the risk to service users and my children. For a long time, my family were classed as working but living in poverty because we were, I don't know how you describe it, not eligible for free school meals but still really struggling. And our situation's changed, and we're working hard to change things for the future and for the girls. So it's only in the last couple of years, I suppose, that I've discovered my blackness, I suppose, and started to embrace it, enjoy it, understand it, appreciate it, and use my voice more. So some of my poetry is about me and who I am as a Black woman or a mixed race woman, and some of it's about poverty. So, and they're not as good. Hands up, you guys have made me look like I'm nowhere near as good as the guys that have spoken so far. So this skin I'm in is a beautiful skin with its caramel tones. This skin I'm in is a beautiful skin holding together my bones. This skin I'm in is a beautiful skin filled with positivity and hope. This skin I'm in is a beautiful skin, so I will never mope. But the skin I'm in may seem to some that I may not belong. The skin I'm in may be too much for me to sing my song. The skin I'm in may be too dark for others to accept. The skin I'm in may say to some that I should have just wept. Thank you. This one is called A Hug. So my mum's side of the family are white British, and there are generational issues around racism. I'd like to call them generational, and I'm hoping that they're generational issues around racism. So this is called A Hug. I'm conflicted because you care, because you said you'd always be there. Your hug, one only a grandmother could give. Your love and compassion you have always shown me to my face, pretending never to be bothered about my race. Your hug, one only a grandfather could give. You would share old tales of time gone by, and now I don't know if you were just being sly. Your hug, one that only grandparents can give. You showered us with gifts while we were there, and showered others with slander about us so everyone would stare. You told us we were special to you while we were with you. Behind our backs, you were calling us mean things too. Your hug, one only that a family member could give. The little microaggressions you didn't know you did out loud, not knowing if you ever really stood proud, your hug, one only that a racist could give. Thank you, sorry. I'm aware of time. So my mum is a lover of music. So this one hasn't even got a name. The music plays loudly, as if the rumble of the bass will heat the radiator, as if the melody will mean one less holy jumper, as if the harmony can heat just one room. The music rumbles on as dinner is served, a meal made from scratch, the ballad of instruments creating a full song. We sit and pretend that we eat like the rest of the street, but inside we know we're dancing to a different beat. The food's sparse and seasoned well so that we can eat as we shovel it down to the beat. Thank you. And I want to share this one with you. I am aware that COVID was really hard for a lot of people, and I've been really fortunate to keep my job throughout COVID and to work full-time from home with 4 children who haven't been at school. It's been nice. And I've been really fortunate, but I wrote this in the middle of COVID, and yeah, the pressure of having to work, I suppose. We're told being a mother is a full-time job, but go and get a job. We are told being a mother is the hardest job in the world, but we're lazy if we're not working. We're told that working will show our children what they can aspire to be, but I don't want my children to be as stressed out as me. We're told that money cannot buy you happiness, but forced into jobs to pay the bills. We're told that they will grow strong and independent, but not have our nurturing while we work. We're told so many things about parenting. If being a mum is a full-time job, that's about 37.5 hours a week. If my actual full-time job is also 37.5 hours a week, that equates to 75 hours of a week working and parenting. There are only 168 hours in the week though, so that's okay. And I'm just gonna, Trey, have I got time for just 2 quick ones? Yeah, cool. So this is called I'm Not Good Enough for You. I'm not good enough for you. I'm not pretty enough, not petite enough, and my feet may not be dainty. I'm not good enough for you. My shoulders may be too broad, my thighs too thick, and my pelvis way too wide. I'm not good enough for you. My face doesn't belong in a magazine. It's not always painted, and my eyebrows almost never plucked. I'm not good enough for you to hold as a trophy on your arm, to parade around all your friends, and I may just say fuck too much. I'm glad I'm not good enough for you, with your shallow expectations, expecting women to fit in, to be your little creations. I won't shrink my body for you. Appreciate me as I am. I am whole, I am strong, I've combated a lot. My power is my strength. I won't hide who I am from anyone, not my language or my soul. I won't shrink my hair or paint my face like I'm some sort of doll. I won't partake in beauty regimes to make you feel good, not me. I am what I am, and I like what I see. Thank you. I'm going to, this one again was written in the middle of COVID, and it was a bit like, I need that sort of hope to keep going. If I give up now and just take a short breath, it will all be lost. If I stop and change my focus, my eye will be taken off the ball. If I just give in to this feeling and come to a halt, I will never achieve what I set out to do. If I stop battling at this very moment, I will lose the war I have been fighting. And then the last one from me, sorry guys, I know they're only short. The last one from me, it's called A Secret. I'll tell you a secret. I'm not her biggest fan. I'll tell you a secret. I don't like her all the time. I'll tell you a secret. She is lazy and brash. But I will tell you some things that are not that secret. She is passionate and strong. She'll stand up for anyone if she believes they are not wrong. She is wobbly and solid all at the same time, and oh my God, do I think she's mightily fine. She has boobs and bum aplenty, way more than she did when she was 20. She is mouthy and loud, but she does stand proud. She'll never hurt you, not without thinking it through. She is active and fun and tries to be a good mum. She is flirty and vibrant, but never ever violent. She is clunky and clumsy and a little bit chunky. I love she, for she is me. Thank you.
Thank you, Esther. I've got a bit more information, and then we're gonna have the last scheduled poet, and then after that, if anyone else wants to read again, then they can, and then I'll do the outro. So the Social Metrics Commission stated that 1 in 10 adults from Black, British, Pakistani, Bangladeshi, or mixed backgrounds were unemployed compared to 1 in 25 white British people, and are so more likely to suffer heightened financial strain in the pandemic. They also found that 19% of people where the heads of the household were white lived in poverty in 2018/2019 in comparison to 32% of mixed ethnicity families, 39% of Asian/British Asian, or 46% of Black, African, Caribbean, Black British people, and 42% classified as other ethnicities. So whether we're talking about white people, Black people, people of color, immigrants, and so on, the data is damning, and only gets worse when the narratives of race are intersectional with that of poverty and class. There are other intersections that can be discussed here as well. The Commission also found that half of all people in poverty that lived in a family that included a disabled person as well. They also found 68% of working adults, so that's 5.6 million people, were in families where at least one person worked part-time, and 10% of pensioners were in poverty. Child poverty rates varied significantly between regions, with London at 40%, the northeast of England at 39%, worst affected, and southeast England and Scotland both at 27% least affected. Child poverty rates for England were 33%, Wales 31%, and Northern Ireland 29%. Currently, the poverty line is at 60% of the median UK income, which is £325 per week for a single parent with 2 children, £439 per week for a couple with 2 children, and £239 per week for a pensioner couple. All those numbers are damning. The weekly income is just, you just look at that, it's a joke. Just looking at those numbers, to be honest. So the way poverty presents itself there's a whole spectrum, and it varies essentially. And this is just Britain. In the United States, I'm sure there's another. It'll present itself a lot differently. Take somewhere like Los Angeles, for example. On one side, you've got Hollywood, and then on the other side, you can walk through Los Angeles and see just pure streets full of homeless people filling up the streets. So, yeah, that's basically. I've basically painted a big picture of poverty in the UK. At least I've tried to, done my best to try to. Statistics tell you half of the story, or even part of a story. The more not interesting stories, but the ones that will get you and get in your skin are the ones that people tell you of their own experiences of poverty. And on that note, I want to invite Jerez to the stage to as the final act before we have, if anyone wants to read again, essentially. So yeah, Jerez.
Thank you, Trey. Hi everyone. Thanks again to Trey for organizing all of this, because it's been hard to do events, especially with Corona and everything. I studied with Trey previously, and with friends, we've done a few events together in the past. What I wanted to speak about today is just my own experience and where I'm from and what poverty is like back there. Now, Tre spoke about the Democratic Republic of the Congo, which is of course where I'm from. And one thing that's come up recently, sorry, 1 second. Yeah, one thing that's come up recently in the news and media is the genocide happening in Congo and how long it's been happening for. And the year they gave in the news was 1996, since 1996. But what we know is that Leopold I, who was King of Belgium, got to Congo in 1885, and he declared it the Congo Free State back then. So the death toll from 1885 to 2020 would be far greater than 6 million, because that's a few industrial revolutions and the smartphone era, again, off the back of the African continent. So without further ado, I'll read this poem. It's called DRC. So it says, let me go back to it. Let me take you to the Congo, DRC. That eastern border is a no-go, wait and see. Equatorial climate, tropical birds, leopards, impalas, and primates. And I don't want to fly to Dubai, Bali, or Malta. Give me that market or Inga Falls, I'll get higher. Warmest water that will warm my bones like the soft fire. But on our eastern border, there's a different fire. How many rapes this week? Corpses and bullets amongst the diamond sea. Children covering the earth for diamond sea. FE2, NB206, that's Columbite, coltan, that goldish brick. If you own a smartphone, it's in your chip. How many rapes this week? Fatherless children lingering in the streets. That familiar voice, he wants to hear the soldiers speak. They're in the gully at the bottom of the mountain, it's bleak. And for this coltan, they have no receipt. But Apple made 46.89 million that year, so who am I to speak? Bitter truth, some of them hard to digest. Why is the UN protecting so-called corporate interests? They serve us not, we need them not. In all the duties, they do slack. I wish they'd give the hands of the children back. How many rapes this week? Thank you. And all right, that one was just highlighting the economic crisis and problem in Congo, and the social problem, and the way in which women are treated, not just in Congo, but across the world. There's this thing whereby we have to teach people even that rape culture exists. Well, sometimes we actually still have to teach people that that exists. So it's something that I also wanted to highlight with that poem. And I wrote something about that poem called Babylon, which is talking about the modern state of the world and wanting to tear down everything negative in order to build a better future for our children. And it's linked to DRC. This is something different. It's called Babylon. Pray for the day of peace. Pray for our freedom. Break all the chains. Lay our foundations. Secure the keys and free the children. We know the vampires love to feed on. The game's rigged so we lose, but somehow we win some. Chaos will bring the rise of my son. Illusion of false independence, still whipping us, but ask for forgiveness. They drop crumbs, but we need some more. I think they're trying to get rid of the middle class. They want a world of the rich and poor. They buy up the land, poison the water, steal all the oil and ore. The media, that's the most effective devil in any circumstance for sure. We can't see the chains if they're on the mind. I wonder if there's no cure. But still we stay praying for the day of peace, praying to the time we have to fight for our freedom, breaking all the chains and laying our foundation, securing the keys so we can free the children. We know these vampires love to feed on. The game's rigged so we lose, somehow we win some. Chaos will bring the rise of my son. The illusion of false independence, still whipping us but asking for forgiveness. Babylon. And yeah, that's everything. I think, no, there's one more actually, sorry. Let me not rush. And this one is just about walking past someone I studied with. I think I realized that they were from a different area to me. And because of that, they felt like they couldn't speak to me, or they felt like there would be a disconnect because they were from a worse area. There was, I think, a bit of gun crime in that area. There was a bit of just antisocial behavior, a lot of antisocial behavior, a lot of dangerous things. So this one is called Before You Leave. So it says, Enchanté, so Chantal, pray tell, please tell me where you dwell. Could you make me feel heavenly despite the surrounding hell? Has the estate your frequent stomping ground not affected your state of mind in this province, county your state of mind? Wherefore so many moral and prospects seem to be in decline, only craving a slice or piece of your time for my own sweet peace of mind. Your nourishing mentality feeds mine and for sure shows that we are two of a kind, probably. Indeed, you are refined. Unfortunately, I lack the luxury of subtlety, and sometimes I may be blunt in my honesty, but look past my being too forward to see humor, good intention, childlike decorum. No, childlike cheek and decorum, you must agree is far from boring. So before you take the stride to extinguish the possibility, take a chance on me. I'll increase the probability of you shall remember me before you leave. And yeah, that's everything from me. But thank you for having me. And if you would like to, you could follow me on my socials. That is at Toy Old Soul on Instagram. And thank you. I'll hand you back to Trey.
Thanks, Tre. If anyone else wants to read, before I basically I'm going to tell another history, I do know that history story, then now's the time. So if you want to read again,
Yeah, could I just drop one last piece? This piece is about colorism, and I feel it's a piece that's quite close to my heart. Can everyone hear me all right? Yeah. All right, cool. So this piece is called Color in the Shade. I want to capture the rainbow, to show society that segregation of color is not just a part of life. Attractions of opposites exist. If sunlight and rain can create unity in color, then why can't we do the same? There's no such thing as primary and secondary color because we all came from one tone. The notion that we should be segregated doesn't complement society's complementary color when a rainbow can shine 7 different times through one light. How green are we to be envious of others based on aesthetics? Mellow your melanin hatred and keep your yellow belly thoughts to one side. It doesn't make sense for you to teal people and program colorism into human minds, leaving people numb by words of monochrome rainbows. Blood red states in a state of red-faced anger can no longer whitewash over their color, leaving them hot blush and pink-faced because they can only view color through grayscale palettes and adjust your gradient if your grade isn't entirely compatible for mixing. Gentrifying the color blue to mimic pain or sadness, condensing you in the mental places not to leak paint or stain society's cloth. You must be grateful for blue skies because society has no time to understand your color. Keep yourself in a tone when they must atone for the colors they spilled. They have a washing machine mentality. Can't mix blacks, whites, and colors, but their wardrobe looks like an artist's paint palette. You can turn the sadness of blues and greens to envy of turquoise, but creating positive pictures and trying to develop the negatives. Watercolor they portray when their lives are thicker than oil paints. Society is a damaged canvas that gets bandaged and plastered with every colorful protest and rally cry, opposing the statement that life is all peaches and cream, when it's more like muddy browns that resemble the colors of water that we call the River Thames. How do you expect society to fuse with the government when their form of government meant that equality should not run through the seams of society? Maroon the masses and leave them to fend for themselves, whilst the 1% enjoy the luxuries that the color purple connotes. Hierarchy in society don't want you to speak out in color about the truth being black or white. So they Rubik's Cube your rights and have you subconsciously twisting and turning your mind to segregate color. We can no longer sit around and beige in the sun, skin turning bronze or gold, we can't reflect the jewels within ourselves. Be inspired to speak out instead of filling souls with angry clouds of gray. You can't even see the silver lining because you're so confused in your conformity that you have comfortably believed that titanium and platinum is one and the same color, but ask yourself which one is more valuable. You see, colorism may sound rainbow-like, but there is nothing rainbow-like about these skittle mentalities that believe that black is not a color. They think it's a shade, so they throw shade in our direction, trying to bring light to their colorism and azure their beliefs their criminality is crimson. The irony is ivory. So much so that I tusk at these statements of oppression of color. Can't key the negative thoughts out, so you display it in color TV, HD. Plum, chubby statements of colorism spread like scientific statements with no evidence. Your words will never correlate with the truth. My charcoal skin is a mix of all colors of the rainbow. My allegiance runs a line with the color itself, because your colorism is nothing more than a drip-fed, polluted approach conceptualizing a virus that's poisoning the aquamarine rivers of unity. And I will not stand in anybody's black and white shadow. I will Mandela your mind and bring about rainbow nations from South African colors and color the world in a plethora of colors and take back your racic terms to show you that everybody in the world is colored. I will Jackson Pollock your coloristic statements, because as a human and as a poet, I can also paint colorful words. Even colors have the opportunity to show different tones and shades, lights and darks that we paint pictures with. We must brush strokes of colorism that has painted a fragile picture on the world's canvas and show the world that color isn't something to suppress. So as I sit here, a man made of all colors, expressing my words to you in color, we don't stand for colorism, we stand in color, band together, sunshine, smiles, and rain-filled tears, and capture the rainbow in my heart. No colorism will leave me color blind. I will sing from the top of my soul, because I can sing a rainbow, but can you? That's me, bro.
This guy, Marley, you got to watch yourself.
Wait, we were just saying in the side chat that that we've still got competition, the both of us, even in the slam next week.
a lot of competition, a lot.
It's gonna be bad.
Man, did you still want to read a poem?
Yeah, I've got a short piece I can share with you. I feel like we can't really have an event based around race and poverty without talking about Shukri Abdi, who was a 12-year-old Somali who drowned in a river last year as a direct result of racial discrimination. And some might say that it was a tragic accident, and tragic though it was, it's undeniable that the circumstances leading to Shukri finding herself in that river were as a result of racism and racial oppression and systemic racism, then subsequently failed her in not dealing with what had happened properly, and so an inquest has been opened, which has reopened this week. So I feel like it's quite important to mention her story. I wrote a short piece a while ago about it. It's really short, but I just thought I'd share it tonight. Thrashing around, not a sound while she drowned, except those on the bank with their laughter. She said she can't swim, didn't want to get in, but the promise of friendship she's after. 12 years of age, but too worthless to save, and she's screaming for help from her classmates. Cops just ignore it. She fled from a war, it's too easy to pass on a blackface. Pushing around in the locker room too, but she's too kind a person to hit them. Life of a story, life of a Muslim, black refugee, when there ain't nothing great about Britain. Mother in mourning, there's more to this story, it's not lining up as it should be. Scared of the water, both her and her daughter. We're calling for justice for Shukri. So there's a page called Justice for Shukri that you should check out. There's loads of information on there, but I just think it's so important for us to stand in solidarity with Shukri's friends and family, and to help ensure that this kind of thing doesn't happen again. She was a Somali refugee, 12 years old, who came here for the promise of a better life. Under the worst circumstances, the way she was accepted into the country was through a procedure by which only the people who are in absolute most desperate need across the world can get access into the country that way. So it just goes to show what she fled to then found herself in that sort of situation. So we've got all, that's why events like this are so important, because we need to be talking about it, and we all need to stand with the Muslim community and other victims of racial oppression within our own society. So that's me.
Okay. Did you want to read a piece?
He's talking to you, Kay. That's good.
Sorry, I didn't hear that.
Do you want to read?
Absolutely, I would love to. So this piece is actually new, like brand new. Marley, I was listening to your first piece. I think it's called The Breadline, and I was just inspired. So that's how new this is. It's called Hungry. I didn't grow up hungry. I mean, we had food every day, like the fridge could be opened and there was always something for us to choose. Poverty was something Sally Struthers taught me about on TV. Martin Luther King had a dream, and if you looked at my family, you'd think we were living it in reality. But the truth is, I was starving mentally. See, the picture perfect image painted just for you to see did no justice to the destruction that consumed me. That imagery you saw did nothing to validate the search for love I had embarked on, and I was too young to even know my journey had begun. I've never known the rumble of an empty tummy because there was nothing for me there, and not because my privilege wanted nothing that was there. But I have known the emptiness of being alone, that justice doesn't always come just because you are in a place called home. I have known intimately the horrors of starvation, my worst enemy as far as I'm concerned. I don't know what it's like to hoard breadcrumbs for fear of never having them again. But I am well aware of how you allow your vagina to open for him and 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 even him. And how you encourage your muscles to wrap them in a hug that urges them to grow and spread their seed, for this is the only love you've ever been taught to know. And you wrap your legs around him because you don't want the vacant feelings of being unwanted to come when he goes. I've never known what it's like to be alienated by people because you've no food. But the memory of everyone watching and whispering as I went by is still persistently clear in my mind and tells me again and again not to stare at your situation's outcome. And when adulthood came and I was finally able to open my mouth and share the nightmare that was my picture perfect family of the youth, you proclaim that justice must be served and you bang your gavels down, and all I can do is look at you and wonder why my story is any different than theirs on the street. Why are you so quick to find some kind of fix for the emotional damage love starvation caused within, but so ready to turn your head, pretending not to see the lines of people who are standing hungry with not a thing to eat? Don't they deserve to be full and well like me? When will it be their turn to be heard? Their time to be fed must be now. So sound the dinner bell as a clarion call. We are the generation to bring worldwide starvation to an end. And if you agree, then you know it's time for paper and pen to be laid down and actions must taken to begin. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Special K. I'm gonna end now with just some of the history behind, like, there's a Black history of poverty in this country that I don't think is as known as it could be, unless you really dig in the history books. You won't find out. It's not taught in schools. So poverty didn't start with what we're experiencing now. Historically, poverty it's very commonplace in Britain. Northampton's own Walter Toll, born in Kent, came from a very poor white working class family on his mum's side. His dad was a Barbadian immigrant into this country, and his paternal grandparents were enslaved people in Barbados. When Walter's parents died, he was put into an orphanage because his mum's family couldn't afford to keep him. If he hadn't been put in the orphanage, he and his brother Edward would have gone into the workhouse. So that's the story of Walter Toll, probably one of the most famous Black historical figures in this country. Well, mixed race historical figures in this country. And when we learn about that story, I find we don't learn about that story of poverty within that family. We learn about how he succeeded in football and how he was he was the first man of colour to reach the rank of officer in the British Army, but never the institutional violence that he experienced as a child in not just the care system, but also the class system as well, and then of racism, what they experienced in football and in the army, and in the army too. And in the centuries past, poverty was commonplace for much of Britain's populations. Wages for the working class masses were extremely low. The National Archives tells us that when crops failed or manufacturing was depressed, workers were often in danger of destitution. Then there was a thing called the Poor Laws, which prevented many from starving, but did not keep them out of poverty, because it stopped them going hungry, but it didn't stop much else. These Elizabethan laws were from the early 15th century, and were a piece of legislation that attempted to care for, but also to control the poor. During the Elizabethan era, and in the reign of Henry VII and Henry VIII, we know there were Black Tudors, and we know poverty has always been a problem. It would be naive to not think that Britain's Black/brown populations at the time would not have been consumed by it. However, we don't know if back then Black and Asian people in Britain were more likely to be in poverty than the white population. But the Queen at the time, Queen Elizabeth I, and I quote, she blamed the inequality on the great number of neggers and blackamoors, quote unquote, for consuming food in time of shortage. This does not tell us anything about disproportionate outcomes, but it does tell us about racial bias in the monarchy and the need to find scapegoats. Just as the media scapegoat immigrants now, back then Elizabeth I found fault with the Black and Asian population in time of hardship. Later on, we also know that there was great hardship for Black people in London during the 1780s, the same years that Britain was a major colonial power. The National Archives also tells us that in 1786, as I mentioned in the poem, that the Committee for Relief of the Black Poor was founded in response to the number of destitute Indians walking the streets of London. Back then, unlike today, the term Black was often used as an all-encompassing term for anyone that wasn't white. The National Archives goes on to say that Lascars, the Indian sailors who worked for the East India Company and other ships, were promised their passage back home to India, but the company did not always fulfill its responsibilities, and many of them were set adrift in England. The committee was soon helping other Black people that had fallen on hard times. One example was that the number of destitute Black American loyalists that had fought for Britain in America's war for independence, formerly many of them enslaved African Americans that escaped slavery to fight for the British on the promise of their freedom should they survive the war. Many of them moved to Britain after the British defeat, one of the most famous being the African American boxer Bill Richmond, who won 17 out of 19 professional boxing fights in his career. And this was in a time where boxers did not wear gloves, they didn't wear gum shields. If you were in the ring, you could die in the ring, essentially. But that was nothing compared to slavery. And he's recorded as the first Black British sports star that we had in this country. He was born in America, in Staten Island, and he was formerly enslaved, and he came to this country as, I think he was 17 years old when he came to this country. So Britain naturally claims him as part of their history, because he spent most of his life in Britain, more of his life in Britain than he did in the United States. And the Committee of Relief met often at Baston's Coffee House in London to look at the problems of poverty and homelessness facing the Black poor and to organise a solution. Initial relief came in the form of food and a £6 per person being handed out daily. By September 1786, nearly 1,000 people were receiving money. The government paid more than half of of the £20,000 given out. The number of black poor, predominantly men, came to the attention of Henry Smedman, a businessman, and in 1786 he proposed a plan to the Black Poor Committee and government to send them to Sierra Leone. He wanted to deport them back to Africa, somewhere none of them had ever been to. In essence, many did not like the sight of so many black poor people on the streets of London, and you could argue the sentiments were as classist as they were racist. One of the biggest fears for the black poor was being carted back into slavery from Sierra Leone. Remember, 1786, it would be another 50 years or so until slavery was abolished in the British Empire. The government and the committee tried a number of ways to encourage and even force them to go. Payments to the black poor were now made only to the people who agreed to go to Sierra Leone. The government also gave the settlers a written agreement that appeared to offer them some protection. The famous anti-slavery campaigner, Oluda Equiano, was employed to arrange supplies for the journey, but he was sacked after moaning about corruption and the mistreatment of the black poor. Corruption and mistreatment by a man called Joseph Irwin, who had taken command over the organization of the scheme after Smedman died in July 1786. This reparation scheme, repatriation scheme, was disastrous. Some 400 of those who signed on refused to leave on the ships that were to carry them to these new settlers to the African continent. These ships were held up on the Thames, where the passengers endured awful conditions. The writer and activist Otto Bucagano, who opposed the scheme, writes how many perished with cold and other disorders while waiting to leave. The ship did leave in April 1787 with 350 black passengers, 41 of them being women, and also 59 white women who were the wives and widows of black men. En route, 35 died. When the ships reached Sierra Leone, the conditions were hazardous and grim. Torrential rainfall made growing food difficult, as well as building homes. Rations sent from England were exhausted. Many of the new arrivals died from disease, and their new settlement was destroyed by slave traders and local rulers. By 1791, only 60 of them were left. The British government had failed to make any sort of alliance with the inhabitants of Sierra Leone. Gagano believed that had such an agreement been sought, many more Africans in Britain would have embraced opportunity. And he writes, and I quote, "with great gladness to reach their native land, the future of the new colony known as the Grain Coast of West Africa," and renamed by the British as the Land of Freedom, was left to an entirely fresh set of black loyalists who emigrated from Nova Scotia in Canada, also followed by the Maroons in Jamaica, who were essentially deported by the British for basically the Maroons were in part from Ghana, or what is modern day Ghana, and their leader Nani, they basically were escaped slaves who made settlements in Jamaica, and they were basically a nuisance to British colonialists, and they killed British soldiers on sight quite a lot of the time, and just resistance and rebellion. And when you think about anti-slavery sentiment and anti-slavery insurgency, the Maroons were one of the biggest people that took part in that. So essentially, they deported them from Jamaica so they could carry on colonizing, essentially enslaving, without any resistance from the Maroons, in a way. They established a settlement which they named Freetown, and today that place, Freetown, is the capital of Sierra Leone. Many of the descendants of those first peoples that were there, they are descendants of the Black Poor from Britain and America. And today you can see the cotton tree in Sierra Leone in Freetown, and that's still a symbol of the first settlers that came there in that time. So the history of poverty and race, it goes back centuries, even before a time when we were measuring disproportionate outcomes. history goes back to the 18th century, but I'm sure there's stuff that happened before that as well. So yeah, if there's anyone else that wants to say anything, or if anyone's got any more poems, because we've finished quite early. So if anyone else has got anything else they want to say, now is the time. Sure. No. Androna or Robin.
Well,
Thank you again. Thank you to everybody who's spoken. I think the standard has been staggering of every person who's spoken tonight. These are inspirational work, and I've been really impressed. And we will, I'm sure, want a copy of this so that we can stream this, make this available through Hope's social media. I've been sending links to all the stuff that you've been putting out. Rohan, Jires, and everybody who sent you links. Everybody was fantastic, and you've all done brilliant work. And I'm so proud to have been involved in helping to get this put on. And I think we should do this again. Thank you.
Also, finally, again, thank you to all the performers, but particular thanks to Tre, who's held the entire evening together. It's been quite a lot of effort, I know, and also just pulling it together as well. A point in time where there was loads going on for him, so it's just really wonderful that we're getting this right on the agenda and we're doing stuff collaboratively in Northamptonshire about this. And thank you so much. Watch this space, there will be more.
Thank you. And say good night then. Thanks for everyone that's performed. Thanks to everyone that's coming in and watching. And I'm going to hopefully doing this again, probably in February. There's been a number of articles online under the banner of abolition for the people is the tag, and the African-American football player Colin Kaepernick is leading it, and he's written articles on that about defunding the police and that concept of defunding the police, but also in prisons. So that's what the next one's going to be on. And Angela Davis is involved in that concept as well. So if anyone wants to read again, that's basically going to be the theme of it. If we can do it in person, maybe, but I'm doubtful. So it's going to happen either online or somewhere. So if you want to read, just message me and I'll make the list as soon as possible, really. But yeah, thank you.